Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 130 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday evening. Yes, Saturday evening, and I'm joined by Scott Coleman, as always. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Brad. I'm doing well. How was your holiday? How was your Christmas? How is Brad Rowland's world these days?
You know, we're living the dream out here. I am fresh off of a Atlanta Hawks home victory that I covered in person, so we're recording this podcast on a Saturday. We navigated Christmas. We'll see how the next holiday goes. You know, it's that time of year where days don't matter, which is why you and I are recording on Saturday. Who knows? Who even knows what day it is right now? No one's going to work. How's Arizona this time of year, Scott? Is it beautiful?
It's lovely, actually. It's not a surprise. I mean, I swear, like every person over the age of like 55 is in Arizona right now. Makes sense. It was 70 degrees today. Beautiful day. It was the Snoop Dogg Gin and Juice bowl game just down the road from me. I did not make it out to go see Snoop and all of that festivity, but yeah, this is for all of the days of hell in like July and August when it's 111 degrees out here. Arizona in July or in December
Yes,
is the place to be, and try to enjoy it as much as we can.
that's right. And you know, you and I talked twice last week, and we were pretty upfront about it. We talked twice at the same time. We did an episode. We published it. We also banked an episode that published a few days later on Matt Olson. We should just say now, those two shows are relevant at this point in time. We did a show, it was a mailbag episode for the holidays, and we did a Matt Olson deep dive as part of our player capsule offseason series. Those are available for you. Also, we encourage you to subscribe to Hammer Territory anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We're on YouTube. Please like the video there if you want to see our shining faces. But you know, still all quiet on the Braves front at this point in time. We weren't sure if they might stick something in. Once Christmas got here, we were pretty sure they weren't going to do anything for a few days, as most of the time that's what happens. But there have been some players who have signed deals since the last time that you and I talked, and made Braves fans mad in the interim to varying degrees. So quickly, we'll run that down, and then later on in the show, we'll kind of go through the state of the market, who's still available, because 2024 is almost over, Scott. This might be the last time that you and I talk this year. We'll see. But anyway, a quartet of players have signed bigger deals. Corbin Burns coming to your home in Arizona for a lot of money. Teoscar Hernandez back to the Dodgers. Walker Buehler to Boston, and Joc Pederson to Texas. I guess the Burns one's the most recent and kind of the biggest name. It was a late night one. Your guy Jeff Passett, I think it was like 1:30 in the morning, whatever it was when that broke. Kind of a surprise to the Diamondbacks. Not that Braves were supposed to be interested. Like we kind of did not believe any Braves interest was ever going to happen there, probably on Corbin Burns. But your takeaway is, I think, the right one. The National League, man, like this is a team that wasn't necessarily like Arizona's been good for a couple of years, but like they were not supposed to be like a contender in capital letters. It's like, oh, Arizona's spending money on Corbin Burns. Like it might be a gauntlet in the National League.
Yeah, the National League is going to be ridiculous. You have the Braves, you have the Phillies, you have the Mets. That, to me, feels like three very probable playoff teams unless something very weird happens. You have the reigning champion Dodgers and their unlimited money. You have the San Diego Padres, who, I mean, if the Padres beat the Dodgers in the playoffs last year, I think San Diego would have gone all the way. Maybe that's hot take-ish, but I mean, they whooped the Braves, and that was just such a good, complete team. We're actually going to talk about a former San Diego Padre a little bit later on the show as a possible fit for the Braves. And then you have the Diamondbacks, who are a year removed from being in the World Series. And even if that was a bit of a surprise, you know, you talk about a team that now has Burns and Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. I mean, that's as good as a 1-2-3 as you're going to find, and a sneaky good lineup too. And then Milwaukee always finds a way to be competitive and involved. So, you know, no real take on Corbin Burns. He lives in Scottsdale. It sounds like he took less money to go to the Diamondbacks to stay home. He gets to do spring training just down the road. He gets to play all of his games down the road. You know, if you're a San Francisco Giants fan, you're probably not sleeping super well because the Giants were heavily favored to land Burns earlier on. And it sounds like the Blue Jays lost out on like the 500th free agent this winter as well. But yeah, man, big takeaway. The National League is ridiculous. And one other just quick note that Max Fried, old friend Max Fried, ended up getting the most guaranteed dollars between Burns and Blake Snell this winter. So good on Max, a very wealthy man now, and hopefully he does good things for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think the reporting that was out there about Burns is probably right. I can't imagine Arizona was the biggest pure dollar bidder. Like it was a pretty favorable contract for Burns as well. It's got an opt out, no trade clause. Like I'm sure, and this is a reminder to us too, but also to fans in general. Like just because you would have done a deal doesn't mean that player was going to do that deal with the team that you root for. And this is a Braves podcast, so it applies to the Braves. So we don't really know what the Braves have offered anyone because Alex is not going to tell us. But it's just a subtle reminder because I don't think Burns was in the mix for the Braves, but it applies to other players too. Like for instance, Walker Buehler, we'll get to in a second. I have a feeling Walker Buehler probably got offered a contract by the Braves. Is my best guess. Was it more than what he got in Boston? We have no idea. But like, it doesn't mean that he doesn't. The Braves aren't trying to sign players. Like they probably have made a lot of offers to players, and also guys take less money. I mean, Max, I think pretty clearly took the most money, which is, by the way, not anything that I have an issue with at all. There's no requirement to give anybody a discount ever, but like some things are prioritized for different players, different agents, etc. Burns might be able to get back on the market in 2 years. Like he hasn't actually been super dominant the last couple of years. Like if he suddenly finds it again, hits the market again in 2 years. Anyway, not a Corbin Burns podcast, but it is a reminder. Like total money is not always. It's often the indicator. And I think our mutual friend and colleague Stephen Tolbert's been right on this on Twitter. Every time you get a leak that says like, why did so-and-so player sign this contract? And the framing is always like, oh, they're really about competitive situations. And Stephen's like, or they paid them $200 million. And I think he's generally right about that. I mean, Max is a great example. Like Max said all the right things at his Yankees press conference, but in the end, it's like, hey, they gave him $200 million. That's why he went there. But anyway, it's always more nuanced.
Right. Why did Juan Soto go to the New York Mets? Because they gave him $765 million, Brad. That is why Juan Soto is with the Mets and not with some other team.
If he was offered $500 million from somebody else and $765 from another team, look, not everyone in the world would turn down the extra $265, but most people would just take the most money. It is what it is. That's natural. I understand at that stratosphere, like it's all kind of the same. I think we've probably acknowledged that day to day, but we're not in that tax bracket. At least I'm not. Maybe you are, Scott.
Yeah. Hey, listen, man, if you're an accountant and you're job hunting and one firm offers you, I don't know, 150K and the other one offers you 100 and the other one offers you 75, well, you're probably going to the one offering 150 because maybe money isn't everything, but I don't think a lot of these guys would play for fun if they weren't getting a lot of money at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I don't think Corbin Burns would have taken half of the salary to go back to Arizona. But if all things are relatively equal, you can play at home. It's kind of the Charlie Morton thing, right? Like for the last few years, like I think Charlie probably got comparable offers from other teams, but he's like, hey, I like to play close to my house and have spring training close to my house. Yep. It's very familiar. Anyway, Teoscar Hernandez is the one like no one was surprised by. 3 years, $66 million to go back to the Dodgers. Like everyone thought he was going to do that. Would that have been a deal that I could have maybe reasonably argued the Braves could have given out? Yes. But do I think that he would have signed the same deal with the Braves? No. I think if you got the same offer from the Dodgers and the Braves, he was going back to the Dodgers. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. He said as much about 25 times after winning the World Series with LA that he wanted to return. And yeah, I would have happily taken Teoscar Hernandez. Looking back on it a year ago, he was a free agent who really did not have much of a market.
Yep.
Maybe it would be a different story if the Braves would have gone out and signed him instead of moving all the money around to get Kelnick or whatever other priority they would have had to change. But good for Teoscar, a really good hitter. Some questions about him defensively, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if anyone really expected him to leave Los Angeles.
Yeah, no one really did, honestly. At least that I saw. No one in the insider realm did. The other two that I think got more Braves reactions than I saw. We teased it already. Walker Buehler was a guy that, he was the rare free agent the Braves were actually kind of tied to a few different times from credible reporting. He was very Alex-y, kind of a rebuilding project because he had, high highs in the past, etc. But candidly was not very good the last couple of years between injury and even this last year. He was really good in the playoffs. Before that was not a good pitcher with the Dodgers. Let's just be real about that. He got 1 year and $21 million. And you and I kind of not like disagreed, but it was interesting. Our reactions were different. I actually thought he was going to get more than this. Not that he necessarily should have, but I thought he was probably going to get more. And it's like, 1-year deal with Boston. It's a lot of money for him, for sure. And I think you're on the other side, like, okay, $21 million. Like, why is anyone mad about this? Is that a reasonable what you kind of said about Walker Buehler and the reaction?
Yeah, I mean, my mentions, Brad.
Oh, they were bad. Everybody's were. Mine were too.
I guess, okay. Would I have taken Walker Buehler on the Braves? Yes. No questions asked. It felt like a Braves type of move, a once very talented pitcher. But at the same time, he has now had Tommy John surgery twice. And the last time that Walker Buehler was a good starting pitcher in the majors was 2021. That's a long time ago. It's not a guarantee that he's suddenly going to be great again. So I know that, again, if the Braves have made some moves already, then I think the reaction would have been more muted of like,
yes,
okay, like I would have taken Walker Buehler, but we've already signed this player and traded for this player. But of course, because the Braves have done literally nothing, every time there's something announced, it's just like pouring more and more gasoline on the fire, and the takes get hotter and hotter. So, if you told me, I think I said on the podcast coming into the offseason that I could see Walker Buehler being a member of the Braves on opening day. $21 million. It was basically a qualifying offer that he signed from Boston. I think 21 million was the qualifying offer, and he signed for 21.05 million just for I don't know why. He just probably wanted to show that he was worth more than a qualifying offer. But yeah, I mean, a little bit of a surprise, and I think you're probably right that the Braves were interested and maybe even offered a contract. But clearly, Buehler was looking for a 1-year deal to bounce back, and he's 30 years old. And who knows? Maybe we're talking about Walker Buehler as a free agent target this time in a year if he has a good season with Boston.
Yeah, and it's nuanced. That's why I brought up the thing about earlier about, like, not every offer is created the same. If you gave me a choice and said, okay, yes or no, Braves 1 for 21 on Walker Buehler, I think I would have leaned yes, but not in a way where I would like be throwing the parade if they signed that contract. I think we would have come on the show and said, hey, reasonable gamble, high upside, very little risk. It's a 1-year deal. I mean, all 1 year, there's always some risk, but like 1-year deals don't have a lot of risk. It would have been totally reasonable to me. It would have been very Alexy, but also it's not crazy that they wouldn't offer that. And by the way, they might have offered 1 year and $21 million. We have no idea. So it's this nuanced thing, and you're 100% right. The reaction was what it was because the Braves have not done anything. And I get it. There is building frustration that is happening in the fan base, and I totally understand it, but that's just the reality. If this deal happens 3 weeks ago, even if he signs in Boston 3 weeks ago, the reaction is less. If he signs in Boston 6 weeks ago, the reaction is probably none. Like, it's just what it is, but that's where we are. The other one that has Braves ties, because if it's a former Brave, is Joc Pederson. So Joc signs for 2 for 37 with an opt-out in Texas. And on the offensive side, Joc would have been a great fit, right? Mashes righties, great hitter last year, World Series champion. Joc Pederson should be his full name anyway.
Yeah.
But like, Scott, we did reference Joc on a previous episode when we did some free agent speculation and things like that. And we said this then, we'll say it again now. Joc is a DH, guys. Like, Joc did not play a second, and I looked again to make sure I wasn't crazy. He did not play an inning in the outfield this last season. 0. In 2023, he played like 30 games, and it was like, hey, the Giants were basically like, we can't do this anymore with Joc in the outfield. So I wrote this down in our docs. You've already seen my thought, but like, my comparison for Joc Pederson is essentially he is left-handed Jorge Soler. And I get it. Not everyone agreed with us that you couldn't do the Ozuna Soler thing again. I understand that. But if you saw the Braves effectively give Jorge Soler away because he's DH, I don't think the Braves were ever going to be in the market for a pure DH. And that's what Joc seems to be. Like, yeah, you could put him in left field and pray, but like, it would be the same situation with Soler all over again. It feels like.
Yeah, Joc is probably what Jorge Soler is defensively.
Yeah.
Put 100 fly balls out there for Joc and 100 fly balls out there for Jorge, you probably have similar results. So yeah, I mean, I was keeping it at like 1%. That, I mean, clearly the Braves do not care a ton about corner outfield defense.
But they care a little.
They do care enough, though, in that. Yeah, exactly. They care enough.
If they cared not at all, Jorge Soler would be on the team right now.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we said this before on the show, but I think in a perfect world, Jorge would have been good enough in right field. He would have been their corner outfielder this upcoming season, and then he would have taken over DH duties if, in a year's time, if he would have continued to hit. We'll never know. But yeah, good luck to Joc in Texas. I think that's a really good spot for him. He's going to bat in the middle of a really talented lineup. And yeah, $37 million for him is a really nice payday at this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if he was even a 30th percentile corner outfield defender, then sign me up for this contract, because the Braves do need someone who can mash righties. The Braves do need pop, and they have the relationship with him. I would totally understand the negative reaction I saw if he could even function defensively. I just don't think. I think the not to appeal to authority, Scott, but like when a team doesn't play you a single inning in the outfield for a full season, that probably tells you what they think about his defense, right? I think it's probably just reasonable to think he's not an outfielder anymore. And I get that there's like a level of nuance that you have to get to that's beyond the internet. Like I joked about that. It felt like there was a very sizable Facebook reaction to Joc Pederson signing with the Rangers, whatever that means to you as a listener. But I get it. Like, he would help the offense. There's no argument. And by the way, so would Jorge Soler. Like, the player that they eventually start in left field on opening day will not be as good of a hitter probably as Joc Pederson. It's just that you're weighing different options there. And we saw what they thought of the defensive one DH and didn't want another one, it seems to me. And also, one more time, I know they like Joc from previous years. They could have offered Joc a contract and we didn't know about it, and he could have still gone to Texas. So it wasn't like they, not to bring that drum into the ground too much here, Scott. Maybe we're slightly on the defensive, because look, before we get to the rest of the free agents, it's almost 2025, right? January 1st. And I have been preaching on some level, and I'm not, look, we're not talking down to people right now. I get the reaction. We already said that once. Frustration is totally understandable. What I've been saying for a while, and I know what you've been saying for a while, Steve and Sean have been saying for a while, is if the Braves have done nothing in February, then the reactions that I'm seeing now are reasonable. You know what I mean? It's more that I, in my cold, dead heart, I'm like, all right, I get it. We'll be mad in February if they haven't done anything.
Yep.
And that's where I still am. I think not doing anything Christmas week is not going to change that reaction. That is also wholly unsatisfying to the fan base, and I totally understand that. But I still feel that way now, and it's not an excuse. Like, even people in the media are starting to get a little bit antsy, and I get it. But I am of the posture, and it won't change, that I'm not going to react to the Braves not spending. I've given the stat before, I think last week on the show. I'll give it again now. The Braves were 5th last year in payroll. They were in basically the second plus tax bracket. Like, they're not suddenly cheap. Maybe they are. Maybe they are cutting money, and we just don't know now. But like, until we have proof of that, I personally won't jump to that. And maybe that's just me being ultra media guy, patient guy. But that's where I am. How do you feel right now in comparison to the anger that we're seeing?
Yeah, the Braves have 6 weeks, basically.
Yeah,
it's 6 weeks from right now is Valentine's Day, and then like 2 days later, pitchers and catchers start showing up to Florida. The Braves have 6 weeks to stop being cheap asses. Is how I'm thinking of it.
That's what Scott Coleman said. Brad Rowland did not say that. No, I'm kidding. I think that's a better way of putting it. That people will identify more with you than they will with me. At this point.
I can promise you right now, Brad. We try to be nuanced on this podcast, because if you go on socials, you get everything. You get you get everything from the Braves are cheap, screw them, fire Alex Anthopoulos, to the beat drummers of, you know what, no, this team does no wrong. In Alex Anthopoulos, we believe. And then there's a whole lot in the middle of those two extremes.
And we're in the middle, by the way.
We try to be in the middle
of those two. Yeah.
Yes. And look, man, I promise you, if the Braves do nothing over the next 6 weeks, we will do a show and be like, what the bleep are they doing? Because this is ridiculous. You're in a World Series window. Truist Park is packed every single night from May to September. The battery is packed. The team is good. Spend the bleeping money. I promise you, we will do that show in February. But that's 6 weeks away. Give it 6 weeks. You don't get bonus points for having your roster finalized by Christmas Day, even if it does make for some better podcast content in November and December. Give it 6 weeks, see where this team is at come spring training and come opening day. And if it does come to a point, though, where they have done very, very little, it's time then to have the conversation. I think just a lot of the reaction so far, even if it has been painfully quiet, like unbelievably painfully quiet.
Yeah.
As two fellas who do a couple of podcasts every week, I promise you, nobody is rooting for moves more than Brad and I are. So it gives us something to talk about. But at the end of the day, again, you don't get bonus wins for having deals done in November and December. A lot of free agents out there. A lot of trades can still go down in January and even February into March. Give it some time, and we'll see what the Braves ultimately do.
Yeah, that's well said. I don't have much to add. 6 weeks is a good way to frame it. That's mid-February. You start to get into pitchers and catchers and all those things by then. And if they haven't done anything, we've all said that too. I'm sure we are painted, probably rightfully, as like leaning towards the like everything will be okay, guys. Like I kind of trust Alex, and I do think Alex is very good at his job.
Me
so
too.
I'm more on that side, unquestionably, than the fire everyone, Alex is on the beach somewhere side, which I think is quite funny, honestly. But what you said is perfect. And I think we've all said it to varying degrees. I know Steven has. Steven's probably of the four of us, probably the one that's itching the most out of the four of us. But yeah, if they don't do anything, we're going to kill them for it. Like at the same time, like I'll probably point out, because it's like in my soul, that the Braves are still going to probably be good, even if they don't do anything, which is annoying on some level because they'll still probably be pretty good. But we are in full agreement that they should not sit on their hands here. They should do stuff. They should spend money. You're right. I get often people make fun of me about the printing money thing, but I believe it. The Braves make a lot of money on the Battery. The Braves sell that place out. I go down there. I see it. They should spend money. They should make moves, and it would not just for us, for the podcast. Like, I'm grateful to have podcast fodder, but for the team, they have holes. Like they have stuff that they need to address. And 6 weeks is a good. So wherever you are on your calendars, folks, circle mid-February. And if nothing happens, hold us to account. By the way, you won't need to remind us. But if we haven't done a show by mid-February, bashing them for not spending or not doing anything, remind us. But we'll do that show. It's going to be coming. It might be a 4-man episode, or it might just be Steven screaming full volume by himself on the feed for days on end. Anyway, is that good enough as a table setter, Scott, for where we are in?
Yeah. Should we talk about should we talk about like the state of the free agent market real quick?
Let's do that. So, look, the holes are still the same, right? It's starting pitching, it's corner outfield, it's relievers, and of course there's shortstop where there's literally one person. Ha-Seong Kim's the only shortstop available. Scott, breaking news. It's been the same since Willie Adames signed. There's one player available.
Yeah. We will quickly do Ha-Seong Kim because it has been radio silence on him.
Like nothing. And I've looked. Nothing.
Yeah, me too. I Googled Ha-Seong Kim rumors about 4 hours ago. There was a report from like early November that the Tigers might be interested. There was a report a week later that the Giants might be interested, but they have since signed Willie Adames. And there's just not a ton of teams like actively looking for shortstops right now. I don't know. I mean, maybe things come together and he takes a shorter, like I know Scott Boras originally came out and said that like he was looking for a 4 or a 5-year deal for Ha-Seong Kim. There's no way for a player coming off shoulder surgery and at shortstop, which generally doesn't age very well. But every day that passes is presumably another day that kind of ticks towards the team's side in negotiations, because at some point these players get antsy and want to know where they're going to be playing, where they're going to move their families. So I'm not necessarily ready to do like a full-on Ha-Seong Kim breakdown, because I still think shortstop is probably 3rd or 4th on the priority poll for Alex, and I'm not even sure he's going to get there this winter. But he is, as you said, Kim is basically the only shortstop on the free agent market who would be any kind of upgrade for Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, there are other guys who are comparable to Orlando Arcia, like Jose Iglesias is comparable. Maybe you could argue a little bit better, but I think the only guy who is like clearly better than Arcia is Ha-Seong Kim. And if the Braves don't like him, we wouldn't know that. So it's like, all right, there's trades and that's it. So that's a short breakdown, but that's the list of shortstop. Elsewhere, the starting pitching market has thinned quite a bit because a lot of guys have signed for a lot of money. By the way, the prices in the starting pitching market have been sky high, and we've discussed that a lot on the show the last few weeks and months. Still the case. Quickly, the only guy that's projected for big money coming into the offseason that's still available is Jack Flaherty, a player that I think would have surprised us if the Braves got in on Jack Flaherty at any point, and it still would surprise me. Do you agree with that? Well, before we move on, I think maybe if the market falls on him, there's a point where they might jump in. But at the November levels, like where it was like 5 years and 100+ million, I don't think that's going to happen for Jack Flaherty and the Braves. My personal guess.
Yeah. No, I would agree. The only thing that's mildly interesting about Flaherty, other than the fact that he's a pretty good pitcher, he's only 29 years old. So if Flaherty's maybe looking for a shorter deal to then hit free agency one more time in his early 30s, maybe that would be a reason where instead of looking for 5 years, he's looking for 2 or 3 years, or heck, even a 1-year deal if he really doesn't like the market. And then hit free agency again. Every winter, there's 30 teams looking for pitching help. So that's one minor outlet who I could see connecting the dots on Jack Flaherty, but I'm guessing that some team is going to be hungry and desperate enough to do 4 or 5 years, and I don't think it's going to be the Braves.
Yeah, that's a good way, and that's kind of what I mean about the market. Like if it's just not there for him, maybe it's a pillow contract with the Braves, something like that. Did you know, Scott, he pitched with Max Fried in high school? Did you ever hear that story? Anyway, moving on.
And Lucas Giolito too, right?
Yeah, same team. Weird. They're all friends. Okay, after Flaherty, you got this mid-tier market where like you have Jeff Hoffman, who's been a podcast favorite. I know Sean is all on the Jeff Hoffman train. He is this year's Ronaldo Lopez potential starter, but it's been a reliever. Circle him on the list. We talked about him before. Then you have this like mid-tier of like Nick Pivetta and Andrew Heaney, both of whom like could get some decent money, 8-figure contracts probably for those guys. Pivetta has a qualifying offer. I don't know if that's going to scare the Braves off. I kind of like Andrew Heaney, like as a sneaky target, not sexy at all. Don't get me wrong, but like maybe we think he's better than Charlie Morton in 2025 kind of thing for Andrew Heaney, and at a similar price point, low 8 figures for something like that. I'm assuming you're not moved by either one of those players, but they're kind of in their own tier of like, they're going to get some money this offseason, and it may be from the Braves or may not be, but if they're trying to find some safety, I think Pivetta and Heaney are, other than Morton, are kind of that like mid-tier, short deal, reasonable price.
Sure. Yeah, Andrew Heaney, nobody's going to pop champagne if he were to sign, but
including me.
Probably, yeah.
And I like him.
25, 30 starts, probably a low 4s ERA. He's been durable. He's been pretty good with Texas and Anaheim. And Nick Pivetta is interesting in the sense that if he ever stopped giving up home runs at like the worst rate in baseball, like seriously, the worst rate in baseball among starting pitchers last year, if Pivetta ever stopped giving up home runs at a crazy rate, he would actually be like really good. He gets a lot of strikeouts. He doesn't walk a whole lot of hitters. He's been pretty durable. His stuff is pretty solid. So I could see Pivetta maybe being of interest for the Braves if they think that getting him out of Fenway Park might do him some good. Again, I don't think anyone would be super pumped over a Nick Pivetta signing, but he's interesting enough that he has some stuff in his arsenal that would probably be appealing to the Braves. And if you think a change of scenery or just some adjustments on the mound could get his home run ball under control, then you have a pitcher who could probably be quite good, quite honestly. But that's obviously easier said than done for a pitcher who has always given up 1 million home runs throughout his career.
Yeah, I mean, useful. That's one area, like if they see something they like, but perhaps that's kind of the end of a tier, Bree. I mean, you got Morton still available if he wants to pitch. We don't know anything else that we don't already know about Charlie Morton. And then you get to the lower end guys. I'm just going to say some names. We don't have to add anything unless you want to. A couple old guys, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer are available. Kyle Gibson is a super boring pitcher. Lance Lynn, Jose Quintana, Spencer Turnbull. Like these are all like 5th starter types at this point. Again, at a certain price point, all these guys become interesting if it's cheap enough. but it's just like, I don't know what you want to spend money on, where the market is. And they seem like there might be like, those might be February 10th signings. I don't know.
Yeah, I would be in favor of giving it to Grant Holmes or AJ Smith-Shawver or someone like that. I mean, if Justin Verlander wants to do it for the love of the game at $6 million next season, then sure. But, for a front office that's clearly being at least somewhat cost conscious this winter, I think internally the Braves probably have options that would rival some of those bottom tier guys.
Yes. I'd rather have Morton than all those guys, for example. Even if he's not on the team, but I think he's better than all those guys. Other than, if you want to argue that Pivetta and Heaney are better than Morton, I'll listen to you. The tier below that, I think I'd just rather have Charlie for cost certainty, all those things. Anyway, that's the market quickly on starting pitching. A lot of guys have signed, and a lot of guys have signed for big money. Like, for instance, you mentioned Flaherty earlier. When Sean Manaea is getting 3 for $75, if you're Jack Flaherty, like, you got to get more than Sean Manaea. Like, you're supposed to be better than Sean Manaea. So, like, if that's your floor price, it's just like kind of a lot of money for a lot of these guys. Okay. The one guy we want to talk about a little bit more is at corner outfield, right? So we've discussed corner outfielders a lot. A lot of guys have signed already. We mentioned earlier in this podcast, Josh Hernandez signed. Anthony Santander is not like a guy that I think, well, we think probably, at least we talked about before, is not super Bravesy. Maybe if the market is cheap enough, but he's a good player. Not what they want. Like, he's kind of a lefty masher. They don't really need one of those, et cetera, et cetera. Jurickson Profar. We've discussed before on the show, but not in a ton of depth. He, along with Santander, are like pretty clearly the two best corner outfielders available still on the market. And I'll tee you up. I mean, he seems like he's fairly appealing, Profar, to what the Braves are looking for. Other than maybe the defense, which I think is like maybe a step above Joc Pederson, but it's not very good. But what do you make of this? Because he's not a guy that we focused on a lot on the show, but I think people probably recognize from his prospect days, et cetera, and like might be a fit for the Braves.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm trying to figure out who the Braves are going to go get for the outfield, because clearly they have a need. Like, full stop, the Braves have a need. I would almost argue that the corner outfield is the biggest need for this team right now. But that's, we could probably have that conversation at another time. Jurickson Profar is really interesting. Coming into the offseason, he was projected for like a 3-year, $45 million contract, which seems fair and reasonable. Profar is fascinating because he was really bad in 2023. He had a -1 WAR and was flat out released by the terrible Colorado Rockies. Do you know how bad you have to be to get released by the Colorado Rockies? So flash forward 6 months, Profar signs a $1 million deal with the San Diego Padres. And what does he do? But he basically reworks and retools his entire swing, which is pretty crazy for a guy who's going to be 32 years old next season. You don't hear a lot about guys in their 30s who have been in baseball for a decade deciding to suddenly change everything they do in the batter's box. But after working with Fernando Tatis's dad, who is a hitting coach, Profar put together an unbelievably good 2024 season. Like, legitimately good, Brad. Like, in terms of his expected numbers on how hard he hit the baseball, this is the company that Jurickson Profar kept. And then I'll throw it back to you. Profar was 1 point ahead of Mookie Betts and 2 points behind Rafael Devers.
Is that good?
He was like 3 points behind Freddie Freeman, and he was like 3 points ahead of Bryce Harper. So there are questions about Profar. I get it, and we'll talk about those here in a minute. But even if it's for one season, if you have a year where you're in the same company as Freddie Freeman, Bryce Harper, Mookie Betts, and Rafael Devers, I think it's only fair to have your attention. And if he's available on a shorter deal, then I think he's a natural fit for what the Braves need.
Yeah, that's a good synopsis because, look, this is not breaking ground. But if last year was real, he's a great hitter. I mean, he was a legitimately great hitter last year. And that's not us gassing him up for any reason. He's not on the team right now. We have no reason to gas him up. He was a great hitter last year. You gave the numbers, 139 WRC plus, like, just awesome. Switch hitter too, like not a big platoon split, like just certainly a guy who can check a lot of boxes for you to take much off the table. I'm old, Scott. I remember Profar as like the prospect. 14, 12, 13 years ago, however long ago that was. Like he was I'm not exaggerating. He was supposed to be like an Acuna level prospect. He was the number one prospect in baseball. And that did not happen. But like, that's what I remember first about Profar, still now probably. It's like, he was supposed to be the guy. And then he wasn't. But like, you mentioned this, the swing reworking, like, because of the swing being reworked, I tend to believe it more. Like, I tend to believe last year was more real. Like, would I project him to do what he did last year? No, I wouldn't, because he hasn't done that other than last year. But I think if I had to guess, he's going to be a good hitter this coming season. He's not super old. He'll be 32. Like, that's not over the hill. It's by free agent standards, it's pretty normal. But the work that he did on the swing, plus the talent that he once had or was supposed to have, I kind of believe it more than I would on a lot of guys who had a breakout at 31. Like, it's a little bit scary on some respects. But, he wasn't, the Padres aren't some massive hitter's park either. Like, he was putting up these numbers in a reasonable environment. It wasn't like he was playing in Coors Field. He did play for the Rockies for a while. I like the profile. Now, I mentioned defense already. It's not good by all accounts. I won't claim to have watched Profar play a lot of defense, but when outs above average and DRS agree that you're bad, both of them, you're generally bad most of the time. I expect it to be, again, maybe a hair or two better than the Soler Pederson level. And that might scare you off. Like, if you think he's a DH, like, we're back to where we just were with Joc. Like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to say that on both sides of my mouth. Like, if they think his defense is bad, like bad, you probably want to pass. But if it's a level that they think is passable, then it becomes interesting. So, and I think I would have said, even before all the market bore out the way it's borne out with a lot of guys signing already, if they could have got him for a shorter deal, 3 years probably, at a, $14 to $16 million, something like that, even back in November, I would have said, okay, makes total sense. Now it seems even better because the market's generally has overpaid, or at least paid a lot for everyone, and the market's thinner. So, like, in theory, if he has multiple suitors, his agent, but hey, this guy has a lot of value and not a lot of places for him to go. I don't know. I like it tentatively, even acknowledging that I don't like the defense from what I can see. But the bat, like, long story short, I believe the bat more than I would for most players with this profile because of last year's changes. Like, he became a different hit. It wasn't just like fluky results. His process clearly changed.
Yeah. Also,
his batted ball data clearly changed. Like, it wasn't like a guy who, and I think between the two of us, like, it's not perfect science. We can look at a profile with all the batted ball data that's available now at StatCast and kind of tell you if it was a fluke or not. And it doesn't look like a fluke last year. Now, whether you can do that again is different, but it wasn't like he was just like getting lucky on BABIP and like hitting a bunch of fly balls that got 1 inch over the wall, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it looks like an awesome profile. And because of that, I'm pretty interested.
Yeah. Just again, we'll wrap up Profar here, but just two unbelievable numbers. You mentioned the batted ball data. Profar increased his average exit velocity last season by 5 miles an hour. Now, that may not seem like anything crazy. Like, what's the difference between driving 30 and 35 miles an hour down the street? But for a baseball player, that is unbelievable. That's a huge difference over a 162 game season. Profar also increased his hard hit and hard contact rate by 13 points, which is really impressive. And again, man, go look if you're bored and want to, look into a possible Braves target. Go look at a at bat from Profar in 2023 and one in 2024, and he doesn't even look like the same guy up there. So an interesting player for sure. I'm not sure how many teams are actively looking for outfield help right now. Maybe that's some of Alex Anthopoulos' calculus here, that he doesn't necessarily want to bid against the entire league. And as, say, the Dodgers just signed Teoscar Hernandez, well, they're not looking for an outfielder anymore. Other teams have added outfielders. They are no longer in the market. So maybe Profar falls into the Braves' laps. The defense is a very legitimate concern, but if he was a Gold Glover, he would be getting a 5-year, $120 million deal. And instead, he might be looking at a 2 or 3-year deal at $15 million per. And that is clearly something that Alex is kind of more privy to doing than opening the checkbook for maybe not a 1-year wonder, but to be clear, you are paying for a player at the very peak of what his value could be.
Yeah, and maybe you get a discount, so to speak, because it's only 1 year, and teams maybe aren't buying it. Maybe the Braves are buying it, and other teams are not, and that way they think they're going to get a bargain. So we'll stop talking about him now. It's not like they signed him so far, but there's an interesting middle ground where like he could be a pretty big value if you get him at a deal that's like what we just talked about, like $15 million a year. He was worth a lot more than that last year, a lot more. I'm not saying it's going to happen again, but there is a little bit of a middle there where you could be pretty interested. And, he's probably the most enticing free agent outfielder available for the Braves, given what Santana doesn't do for the Braves' particular skills that they want. Lower down the list, again, much lower down the list, a couple more names to just mention and throw out there. Alex Verdugo, old pal Jason Hayward is still available, hits righties, veteran, et cetera, et cetera. Jesse Winker is like toward the DH side, but we've always kind of liked him as a potential platoonish guy in the outfield. And then old pal Ramon Laureano, still available, probably for cheap. Relationships there. So that, just to be clear, that's a big step down from the others. But noting that. Okay, so one more name, different position that we should talk about briefly is Tanner Scott. So we've mentioned Tanner Scott a few times on the show in these free agent rundowns because he is coming into the offseason was the biggest name, biggest projected contract for any reliever. And he's still on the market right now. He's awesome, for the record. Like, he's an awesome pitcher. That's why he's getting discussed in the way he is. But Dave O'Brien of The Athletic, he's covered the Braves for a long time, right? He's mentioned Tanner Scott enough where you took notice of it. I pointed it out to me. I didn't notice this. I'll give credit to Scott. Scott was like, man, DOB's talking about Tanner Scott a lot. Notable. That doesn't mean anything other than he just mentioned it. But Tanner Scott is not like what you think the Braves, quote unquote, need the most because they have Resto Iglesias. They have a high dollar, awesome closer. I'm using closer in giant quotes if you're not watching the podcast on YouTube, because most of the time you don't pay a number 2 reliever huge closer money, especially when you are on a relative budget. We don't know what the Braves' budget is. This is not the Mets. They're not spending unlimited funds. Same with the Dodgers. There is a budget Alex has. At the same time, we have laughed and joked and poked fun even at times about Alex's proclivity for paying relievers. He tends to like to pay relievers for whatever reason. Will Smith got a lot of money from the Braves. Right on down the list. And right now, Joe Jimenez getting paid to not pitch. He's hurt right now. Iglesias is a big contract. Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer, the list goes on and on. He pays relievers. He just does. Kenley Jansen back in the day. Kirby Yates. What do you make of this? Is it plausible that the Braves could pay a market contract for Tanner Scott, or would it take a discount probably to get him to Atlanta?
Yeah, Tanner Scott, really good. A claim to probably being the best reliever in baseball the last 2 seasons. His stuff from the left side is disgusting. I mean, that fastball and that slider, you're not going to hit it. I mean, that, especially if you're a left-handed hitter, you are not going to hit the baseball. That is such a weapon to have, especially come playoff time when matchups become so important. Tanner Scott, he's interesting. He's going to likely get paid like a good closer. You just said the Braves have a closer, so I don't know if they necessarily want to commit that kind of money. The real question I have about this, and to be David O'Brien said multiple times now that the Braves are interested in Tanner Scott. If the Braves don't care about money and in the next month they're going to drop some cash, like throw out some names. They sign Profar, they sign Tanner Scott, and they trade for a pitcher owed some real money. Then I understand signing Tanner Scott more. But if they are really counting their dollars and they're going to try to get under the luxury tax or whatever it is they're going to try to do, then for my money, relief pitcher is the third priority here behind outfield and starting pitching. And I'd even throw shortstop in there too. So it's interesting. Again, if Tanner Scott's the first move, I'm guessing that it signals that they're going to spend even more money than what we were anticipating, and that Alex was just kind of waiting for the market to develop. But I mean, if they really are counting money, it doesn't add up in terms of dollars and cents. If he's going to be like your one addition when you have a giant hole in the outfield and probably a hole in your rotation, that doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, I can't add anything else really. I mean, I generally like paying relievers less than Alex does. Even with that said, like there are bigger issues. Now, we've also said this, like they could use another reliever. Given the Jimenez absence, which probably for the season, not definitely, but probably for the season, and no Minter right now. Minter's still a free agent. They could sign Minter. But if you just take Jimenez and Minter away, they have some good relievers. Like we love Dylan Lee. Aaron Bummer's good. Johnson was a little shaky this year, but still a good reliever, generally speaking. And Iglesias, like they're in an okay spot with the bullpen. Like the Braves are the envy of most teams in the bullpen, even right this second, without Jimenez, without Minter. But they could use Tanner Scott. Obviously, he's awesome. Sign me up. It's just like, yeah, it's a hard sell. If he's your one big expenditure in a winter with this roster, it's like scratch your head a little bit. It's like, what are we doing here? But you're right. If it's paired with other things, it's easier to explain. And also the price point matters. Like he's projected to get like, I think the one median I've seen is like 456. So like, that's like Iglesias money. Iglesias basically was getting 4 for 60 when they traded for him. It was essentially a free agent signing because they traded nothing for him. It was Chavez who they got back. But they took on a lot of money there, and he's been worth every penny so far. But if your number 2 reliever is making $14-15 million a year for 4 years, and you're paying Jimenez to not pitch this year at $8+ million, which I think we agree, or at least it could have influenced some other decisions. Like that Travis Arnaud timing was not ignored by us. Like I think it's possible that they let Travis go because of Jimenez's injury, which is crazy, but that might have happened. Long story short, like, yeah, if they sign Tanner Scott, I'm not going to criticize them within reason. I think if it's 4 for 80, then yeah, I'll be bothered by that. But if it's 4 for 50 or whatever, 4 for 60, reasonable contract in a vacuum. It's just that's not what they need the most. But maybe Alex is going to like come, as he often does, and just say, oh, you know what? We're going to just throw resources at the bullpen. And look, to his credit, it's worked. The Braves have been awesome in the bullpen for several seasons in a row. And this last season, they had to be. I mean, they had to be awesome with the pitching staff, given everything else that went wrong. And that was a big part of why they made the playoffs. It was a maddening season, but they got a lot out of the bullpen, and that really helped them. So it's hard to like be bothered by the bullpen construction so far.
For sure. And my longtime take on bullpen spending is as long as the rest of your roster is good and has depth and doesn't have holes all over the place, I have no problem with spending on a bullpen. A bad bullpen can nuke an otherwise really good team because close wins turn into close losses. Blowout wins turn into close wins where you're having to use everybody and kind of stress through it. Really no issue at all with spending money on your bullpen as long as you don't have a gigantic hole in left field and a big hole in the middle of your rotation without Fried and Morton and a bottom 5 shortstop in Orlando Arcia. So yeah, we wanted to hit on Tanner Scott. It's interesting to me that as so many players have gotten fat paychecks this winter, that Tanner, who is clearly the best reliever on the market, has not found a home yet. Maybe his agent overplayed it and is looking for too much money. And now he's kind of backed himself into a corner, and who knows where it'll ultimately be. We could also be blown away tomorrow morning that the Dodgers have signed Tanner Scott for 4 years and $80 million, and we all just kind of laugh with half of it deferred through 2096. And then Jeff Passan defends the Dodgers for the 11th time this month. Yeah, don't. Anyway, but yeah,
that's your guy though, Scott. That's your guy. Okay, yeah, you're right. I mean, we say Scott to the end of the podcast because it's an interesting situation. They just need so many other things, but he's still out there, and he's the only. In fact, out of all the positions that we talked about, maybe you could say like Pete Alonso at first base, something like that. What the Braves don't need. Scott's the only premium free agent that's still available, like the top of their own market. Like relievers, he was number one coming into the offseason at the reliever spot, and he's still there. Obviously, all the premium guys are gone. You know, Soto signed, Adames signed, Burns, Fried, all those guys. Like they've all signed now, and Snell. But the number one reliever is on the market still. It's just that number one reliever is not. And by the way, the projections paint this picture. He's predicted to get 4 for 56. That's what, a quarter of what Max Fried signed for. So like, it's not the same exact hierarchy, and relievers should get paid less. That's the nature of the beast. But really good ones like Tanner Scott can move mountains for you. And look, if they sign him, we'll turn around and say, hey, the Braves are the best 8th, 9th inning guys combination in Major League Baseball. And they would. The moment they sign Tanner Scott, they have the best combination of relievers, the big two in particular of Scott and Iglesias in baseball. That would be true. How much you value that is up to Alex to decide. But there you go.
Yeah. So that's the free agent market. AJ Minter is still out there looking for a home.
Is.
I still think that could be a reunion at some point, but I'm guessing AJ is looking for the biggest guarantee possible because he's coming off the hip. Yeah, he's coming off the hip, and I mean he's made money. Let's be clear, but he is not someone who has so much money in the bank already that he doesn't care and is willing to take less money to go somewhere else, the way that a Charlie Morton might or a Corbin Burns might. But yeah, that's the outfield. That's the bullpen. That is the starting pitcher, and that is the very small shortstop free agent markets. We wanted to quickly kind of hit on those before the calendar flips to 2025, and who knows? Maybe the Braves will sign 1 or 2 or 3 of these guys soon.
Who knows indeed, Scott. Yeah, this might be our last podcast between me and you in this calendar year. We won't say it definitely will be. If the Braves make a signing, we'll come back. If they make a trade, we'll come back. You could even get a Sean Steven appearance between now and the final seconds of 2024. But there you go. That's the state of the market right now. We'll see what the Braves do. We've made ourselves very clear that if the Braves don't do anything in 6 weeks, yell at Scott. Go on social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, and say, Scott, you told us in 6 weeks it would all be fixed. I'm just kidding. We should do some engagement farming at the end of the podcast. If you made it this far on YouTube in particular, comment on YouTube and say which of the remaining free agents you want the Braves to sign. Pick one though. One of the guys we talked about on this podcast, and just say, I want them to sign this player. If you just as a present to us, if you made it this far, let us know that you listened this far and comment on YouTube. Scott, anything else you want to add? We went longer than we expected because that's what we always tend to do. Anything else you want to add? And if not, where can folks who are just finding the podcast for the first time at the end of the year find? Where can they all find all of your musings, written, social media, etc.?
Yeah. A big thank you to everybody who jumped on board this past calendar year. Was a very interesting one for the podcast. Very suddenly, we had the battery power show ended upon us, and we ultimately landed with the Foul Territory team here on Hammer Territory, and it's been great. I mean, seriously, rough baseball season aside, with a million injuries and slow off season and everything else, it's been really great to have all the support this year. So wishing everybody a very happy and safe new year. We will continue to crank out even more shows in 2025. We were just talking earlier today, actually, about some exciting ideas we have for shows to help bridge the gap between now and spring training. If you want to follow me on socials and tweet me when the Braves do not do things, I am at Scott Coleman 55. And again, Happy New Year, and we'll be back soon with another show.
I was hoping you would say you can find me at B_outliers on Twitter if you want to yell. Hello, Steven. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Check out Scott on social media. Check out the show on social media as well. We are at Hammer Territory, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, all those places. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And we'll have more to come. But I appreciate everyone listening to the podcast, as to Scott, as to Steven, as to Sean. We are very grateful for your support. Keep it up for us in 2025, because we're going to be going nonstop, even if the Braves don't do anything. I don't want Alex to test us necessarily. We'd like to talk about stuff that's actually happening. But
That's
even
right.
if the Braves don't do stuff, we were going to have to do podcasts and find things to talk about. And we'll do player capsules and mailbag questions or whatever. We'll grind our way through the offseason, I promise you. But subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the show. Enjoy the rest of 2024 and the start of 2025. We'll be back again later this week, and we'll see you all next time.